Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to talk to you about the new Winsor & Newton watercolour paper. Now, as watercolour artists know, watercolour paper and the way a paper reacts is really important in your final painting. So Winsor & Newton have brought out two new papers, a cellulose and a 100% cotton. Cellulose, the classic range, and the cotton called the professional range. All made on a traditional cylinder mould, and which gives a kind of a handmade texture, but a really high quality paper. So internally, externally sized, which gives a really good, durable, stable paper. So I just want to have a quick look at these. This is the classic cellulose paper, available in knot surface. So let's just have a look at the surface of this paper. I use red because I love red. And with every paper you get, it is worth trying and testing. And you may know all your techniques and you're familiar with another paper, but when you get a different paper, it often reacts very slightly differently or in a way that you don't expect. Most papers are very similar, so if you're not used to lots of different papers, you won't notice a difference. But people who are and very familiar with one paper, another paper different, doesn't mean it's worse. It just means it's different and may give you different feeling that you may have been looking for. Try different watercolour papers. So here we go. This is the knot surface, and you can see how clean and coloured the nice clean white colour of the paper is really luminous colours. So that's the classic cellulose paper, a good paper to start with watercolours. So if you then want to move on, or your techniques are different and you want a little bit more, a tougher paper, one that you're going to be a lot of wet, a lot of scrubbing, a lot of lifting, then maybe you want to go on to the face. This is the hot press surface, so a really nice smooth texture. To see a little bit of texture on this, where other smooth or hot press papers, I can't always see a texture, and I like that. For me personally, I always like a little bit of texture. Using professional cases, the block format. Block format is always a really nice format to use because it means that you don't get the chance of the paper cockling. Now, I've read all Winsor & Newton's details about the paper, and they say the paper's been made to a really high quality, that cockling isn't a big issue. But with any £300 paper, when you add a lot of water, it's going to have some cockling. But in a block form, because it's glued on four sides, it holds the paper, so you're not going to get those waves. Blocks are always a really nice format to use. So let's just have a quick look at the hot pressed surface and do little demonstrations on each of the surfaces. So again, I'll just do a quick swatch using a natural hair brush because that gives me the right amount of water and pigment for a nice, long, free-flowing colour. There we go. That's not a lot of colour. I like a lot of colour. There we go. You can see how smooth that paper is and how clean the colour goes on. So let's just change brushes. Let's do a little demonstration. So a hot press paper is often used by people who want a really smooth finish. A botanical artists are very keen on a good hot press paper because it gives that nice, clean, fresh lines that they're looking for when painting flowers or vegetables or trees. So let me have this is going to be a quick demonstration, so I'm just going to, it looks a bit odd, but hopefully it will work. So I'll just do a little bit of flower. This is get the blue, get the water flowing. So on a paper, the water does tend to sit on the surface a little longer. It isn't absorbed as quickly as on some of the other surfaces, but this allows some really subtle tones, using it very wet in wet. going to do is I'm going to abuse the paper a little bit by making it very wet, scrubbing into it, really layering. I just want to see how it works. So often when you get a new paper, try and really work on it more than you would normally, because you want to see its full potential. Flower. There. Use colour. Again, as with all these little demonstrations, I tend to use just very few colours. Red, yellow, blue. It works for me. All very loose. What you can see is the nice fresh crisp lines that it's giving here. Again. I'm just trying to see how, with my style, it works with the paper. So now I'm going to go into the flower. These have little. I want to see how sharp a line I can create. And it's just holding that edge of colour. That nice sharpness, which is great for botanical drawing. Or a nice landscape where you want really fresh, smooth washes. Maybe an animal portrait where you want clean, crisp lines. That's very red. So I need to just soften this a little. This is going to be just a quick demonstration. It's never going to be a fully finished painting. And I do a lot of these, just little demonstrations. Firstly, I'm learning the subject. I'm just learning how I can just, the shape of flowers, the shape of bees, the colours that I need, without worrying that I'm going to produce a finished piece. Not what I'm aiming for. Just add some flowers and bring some of the colour down. Some petals, sorry. And again, I'm not over worrying. That's not what I'm looking for in this little study. What I'm looking for is how the paper works. So onto my bee. Start with yellow. So in order for me to understand and paint a bee, what I've done is I've looked and I've studied the shape of a bee. I've kind of looked at its head, its body, its thorax, and by just looking and under shape means I can draw a bee. Bees then have different colours, different stripes, and those are just, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. This, I'm giving you a representation of a bee. I'm not giving you a specific type. So I just know that the shape I'm going to create will give you the feeling that there's a bee. So again, not thinking of colour, not thinking overly about detail. And you can see that looks like a bee to me. Just want to put, for me, just to finish off, a little bit of tonal value here. And because this paper's so soft, I can probably put a little bit more detail. Give him some legs to stand on. And maybe a little bit more shape. But what I will do normally is I'll just keep working and keep losing some of the shape. But I think that works. What I want to see is how does the paint sit on the paper? How do I get nice crisp lines? Which I think here, for me, it's given nice, fresh, clean lines. So that's the hot pressed paper. Let's move on to the rough. So the rough gives you that really kind of handmade texture because of the way it's made through the cylinders. But the fibres are really closely knitted together and internally and externally sized, giving you a really tough paper. So let's go back to the natural hair paper. Let's change colour and have a look at the texture across the top. So you can see there, again, lovely colour, but see how it takes the colour, it grips the colour and gives you these really nice brush marks. So this textured paper allows you to create lovely sparkle. So what I'm going to do is I'll do a little demonstration just using, it'll be of water, just so I can show and you can see, bridge, the texture of the paper. So again, I'm going to try wet in wet techniques and just see how the paper works. I've just caught a little bit of colour here, very wet, and I can see from that it is actually very soft. It makes the colours really soft and move quite a lot. So I'm just going to show you here. Wet all this area around. These are just, again, little demonstrations. I could do lots of little swatches and techniques, but sometimes it's nice to see a little painting, a little study, because it just helps. You see how the paper works. So I'm going to put some colour here. Look how much movement you get in the wet technique. See how much it flows, which is really nice. So soft across a green bank here. Take away some of that blue. So this is a wet in wet technique, because I want to see how much, when the paper's wet, how much it moves. And that is quite a lot. That's quite nice and soft. Lovely mellow colours there. Let's put the bridge in. Because it's wet, it's going to be soft in the background. See how I can bring out maybe some sharper detail. Let's see how it works dry, wet on dry. Lots of different shapes on the riverbank here. Let me change the colours and tonal values. Works quite nicely. So you can see how it takes the colour, and I'm quite happy with the colour's quite nice and fresh, because I've mixed quite a muddy green. Colours back onto the bank. Add some little yellow lilies on here. So for a first layer, I think that's really taken a lot of the colour that I was looking for. So let me just put a little bit of colour on the other side, just so we can see what we're looking for here. Take it into the background. So much lighter. This is obviously where the light is coming from. Just put an edge on this bank. So while this is very wet, I'm a little bit more surprised about how soft you can get the colours. So maybe I wouldn't do a wet in wet wash if I'm trying to get a much more detailed shape. But I do like the way it moves. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, just saying it's something that, you know, I like about this paper is the way it softens the colours. So I'm going to have to think about how they're used in the future. So let's just put some trees. This is still very wet, so as I said, I'm quite surprised how much it softens the colour. So maybe I wouldn't have put it so wet or let it dry before I then started to add some tones. So leaves going over the riverbank here. And you can see the difference between here, where they're really sharp, and here where it's wet, and it's still wet. It's not even drying under the lights, which is really good, especially if you're doing a sky. or you want to create a nice soft background. So I'm just going to put some, so this is a dry area which I've left purposely dry because I want to see how I can create texture in the water. So the water reflects the colours, usually from the sky, but will also reflect the colours, the greenery. I need to add some blue. What I don't want to do is really lose some of the white speckles. It's going to be darker on here, where at the edge of the river where it's meeting the bank. You can see the sparkles there. Add some more water. So at the moment, like I say, I'm quite surprised with how wet the paper stays, how soft it stays. So what I would probably do is wait till it dries, then start to build up some of these details and a bit more tonal value. But you can see how it works, and like I say, very surprised how wet it stays, which is really very interesting, especially when I think about backgrounds. So that's the rough. So this is the knot surface. So most people will go for a knot surface. It's a nice medium surface. It has a bit of texture, but maybe not as much as the rough, but is not quite as smooth as the hot pressed. So knot is usually what most people are familiar with. I do recommend trying both the hot pressed and the rough because I think it helps you, decide on your techniques and learn new techniques. So back to the natural hair brush. I'll go for a different colour. And let's just do a swatch. So again, I can feel the paper sucking the colour off, absorbing the colour. And I get much more, with the knot surface than I did with the brush, I get much more of a swatch of colour. Texture, again, you still can use those brush marks, but they're not as evident. Let's just do a little demonstration. So with the rough and the very wet softness of the paper, I want to see if it's the same with the knot. But now I've tried it on the rough, I'm not going to be as surprised. All watercolour papers have different characteristics, and I actually really like that softness. So let's do the sheep. Again, this time I'm going wet on dry because I know it was a bit too wet last time. Let's do a couple of sheep. And then mix the green and do some negative painting and bring out the shape of the sheep from the background. Like I say, it is fun to try different techniques. They don't always work. This may not work as well as I had hoped, but if I hadn't tried it, I wouldn't know where to improve, what areas I liked and what areas I didn't. So nice fresh colours, even with this muddy green. I think back can go this way. Seeing how the colours are easily reblended together. So you can see there, I moved them into the middle and I haven't got that harsh line because it stays wet on the surface for quite a while, which means I was able to move them into one another without leaving a harsh line on one side or the other. So that's, again, another thing that, you may like and may use. Okay. So sheep, not got legs yet, but I can put those on. Just using a few colours, seeing how the paper works. So now I can, sheep are a lot of fun to do, a lot in these little test pieces, because there's not a huge amount you need to do, but it does help you see, that's too dark, how to maybe use the paper. So learn your sheep, they're just a kind of an oval with a triangle head and ears. Once you shape, it's a lot of fun to be able to. So this paper is really bringing out and making the colours bling, so I'm having to realise that I need to tone those down a little bit. Neck here, shadow will be under the chin, under the belly. As with anything, to be honest, it's the areas you leave out. So what I'm going to do, for me this is a bit harsh. I know watercolour tends to dry a lot lighter than you've put it on. I think that's still a bit harsh. Okay. So this I know is going to be, I should really leave this dry. If I want nice, clean, crisp legs, I would need to let this dry. But I'm going to see what happens if I put legs on this already wet paper. So that's dried quite well. Actually, they're quite skinny legs. Let's give them a bit more substance. 3 legs. Legs will be coming down here. So again, I have looked at the way a sheep stands, how they hold themselves. It just helps when you're trying to do these little details. Right, those legs for me are a little harsh, so let's see if I can soften how this paper reacts to me going back in with a brush and lifting out some of that harshness. It's working quite well. It's lifting quite easily. You can see how that's softening the colour. So yes, that's now made what looks like really messy areas that I can easily move that around and soften. So that's a really nice feature with this paper, is the ability to be able to layer but also delayer, to go back in, to move without affecting or interfering with the paper below. So that's much better. It's going to be a lot softer. So I've not fixed it because I don't agree with mistakes. I don't think things are mistakes. I just have altered it. A lot softer there. So I'll keep fiddling with that, and I don't need to. I do because I just want to give them a much darker ground to stand on. So I just said that I won't finish. So with any watercolour paper, test and see its potential. What I've really found I like about this is the way it stays wet for longer. It holds the moisture on the surface, which means you get really nice, soft backgrounds and the colours merge into one another. So this is the Winsor & Newton new watercolour paper, internally, externally sized to give it really good stability and structure. So I hope you enjoyed that demonstration, and join us next week for another live demonstration and workshop with Vic Beercroft.